Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishna Project podcast. This is episode number 207. Yes, we are now firmly in the 200s, which I still can't believe. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, and if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, which should be there, so you can be kept updated about future podcasts and video productions from the Hare Krishna Project. Or if you're watching this on Facebook, which is the other platform where you can watch these podcasts, if you haven't already, please do like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page so you can be kept updated about what we're doing here at the Hare Krishna Project. As you know, as well as these wonderful podcasts, we also do other things like book distribution, Hare Krishna festivals, school visits, all those things that keep me almost out of trouble. Okay, one of the things I love about this Seva, hosting this podcast, is I get to virtually travel all over the world, and week by week, we are often virtually, or I am in a different country. And this week, for the first time in a long time, we're going back to Denmark. Now, for other reasons, Denmark's been in the news a bit recently, which we won't go into today, because we're
Yeah,
not here to talk about politics or global affairs. But I'm delighted to be going back to Denmark virtually. Please welcome our guest this week. It's Ajit Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here again.
Again, indeed. Actually, you're in a very elite group of people. You're one of the very few people in history that has appeared twice or more than once
Yeah,
on the Hare Krishna Project podcast.
yeah,
Um, Before today's recording, I had to go back through the archives. We have archives now. And you last appeared in July 2023 on episode 70, about something completely different to what we're talking about today.
yeah,
That was about the topic of book changes. Um,
yeah.
well, not just in ISKCON, but in the Gaudiya Vaishnava community. And today's is a bit different. So, Ajit Krishna Prabhu, it's great to have you back. I really appreciate you giving up your time. I know you're a very busy person with lots of different responsibilities. So let's just do a bit of a recap, because it's a while, it's 2.5 years since we last spoke.
Yeah,
So a bit of a recap. Please tell us a bit about you and where you are from.
yeah. So, I am from Denmark, and I've been like trying to become a serious devotee since 1998, where I read Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. I was searching for knowledge, searching for the truth, and searching for God. And all of a sudden, I had Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita in my hand. And I took it home and I read the introduction, and then I was immediately stunned. Like, it was obvious to me that this could not be like coined up by someone. You know, it couldn't be someone's fantasy. This could only be written if it was actually true. Like, it was more like a realization than a logical inference. But it was clear to me that I have found God. So I just started my journey from there, trying to trying to practice Krishna consciousness. I was living on my own, far away from the Danish temple, so I didn't know anything, and I was contacting them and got some books and got some Ajapa Mala, and yeah, of course I didn't know anything, and I couldn't get any help. There was internet, but not like today. So it was very primitive, and I did not really have access to communication like that. So I was chanting on my left hand, and I took 8 hours to chant 16 rounds, and it was wild the first half year. But then I visited the temple, and I was living there for 1 month, and I learned the basics, and then gradually I also moved into the temple in Denmark, living there while also working as a school teacher besides. And then gradually, I got into it. Um, so this is yeah, this is like how I joined, just very short. And then now I still work as a school teacher. I've been doing that for 25 years. I have a small family. I was a little late in that. So my daughter is 3 years old, and we also have another one on the way. Uh, Definitely the last one because I don't want to become too old a father. But this is also something that goes on in my life and which takes a lot of my time and energy. So, but besides that, I try to be, yeah, engaged in Krishna consciousness, and I have always done this, like the topic of today, like atheism. I've always been into this kind of philosophical stuff. So I have been debating atheists for 25 years also. So yeah, this is what I like to do. It's kind of like built into my mindset in one sense, I think. Yeah.
Before we kind of get into that, talking about your book and the subjects of
Mm.
atheism, can we just talk a bit about what led up to 1998 in terms of what was going on in your life that made you encounter Srila Prabhupada's books? Were you searching? Did you have a religious upbringing? What was kind of going on in your life?
Mm. So I did not have a religious upbringing as such, but my parents were also not talking against religion. There wasn't any religion really. So the full story is that I remember when I was 3 years old, I was sleeping at my grandmother's place, and I was going to bed, and she said, let's pray. And we did, and she mentioned God, and I was asking, who is God? What is this? And then she like explained, oh, God is like he has created everything, and you know he's behind everything and helping us and so on. And I asked her like, but how can I know that he actually is there? And I was very little. I was like, I could have been like 3 or 4 years old, not more than that. And then she told me a story about how she went to church, and on the way home she dropped her. Uh, it was like a songbook, like a religious songbook, and and then in the night she dreamt that it was lying in a ditch, and next day she went there and it was there. So I was like, wow, okay, that was really special. That must have been God. So I kind of like started to develop a relationship with God from that age without having any training in Christianity or anything like that. I was just me and God. And then I went to school and I heard something about Christianity. But then I became a teenager, and then this was not very popular. I was like living like everyone else, and I ended up kind of rejecting God, not very fiercely, but just like, okay, this it doesn't really serve me to believe in God, so I'll just go all into listening to hip hop music and becoming, a tough guy and and so on. So I did that for some years, but then I actually ended up like I smoked a little bit too much of marijuana, so I ended up having some issues, and in that process, I've kind of like my consciousness kind of widened, and I had some experiences which I could not explain. Not only while I was taking marijuana, but also in between. And also then when I stopped using marijuana because I could feel it was not good for me, so I still had these experiences, and it made me search after the truth. And I was reading psychology, and I was reading this and that, but I ended up in the New Age
Mm.
world, and I ended up figuring out that there must be a God behind everything. So I started to pray to God. And I read in one New Age book, actually, I read there was a sentence that the purpose of life was to become a completely surrendered servant or instrument for God. And I was like, wow, that was like the purpose I was looking for. So I started to try to do that. I was trying to When I was running for God. When I was eating for God, and so on. And then all of a sudden, I had Bhagavad Gita by Prabhupada in my hands, and that kind of gave me full assurance and the complete process. So that's like how it went. And then I visited the temple. So it was like, yeah, some say it's a little special way to join. Not like you come to the temple and eat prasadam and you talk, and then gradually, but it was more like I was on my own.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I'm always fascinated to hear about how people encountered Krishna consciousness or how
Mm.
they encountered the books of Srila Prabhupada or maybe another spiritual teacher in the tradition. So thank you for sharing that. When we were last talking 2.5 years ago, we were talking about books. We were particularly talking about Srila Prabhupada's books. And I'm going to link that podcast with this podcast. But today we're talking about a book that you've written, which is very exciting.
Mm.
Um, you've recently written a book or published a book called The Failure of Atheism, a Vaishnava critique of philosophy without God. Can
That's
you
right.
please tell us a bit about it and what inspired you to write it?
Yes. So, like I've debated atheists for 25 years, and there was like I think I was pretty good at it actually. I did it like the way people normally do, is that they present, arguments for God. And of course, we also deal with the arguments from the atheists, like, for example, the problem of evil, like how can God and evil coexist? But especially like presenting arguments like intelligent design and what is called the cosmological argument or the ontological argument, or so there are different types of arguments that are used to argue for the existence of God. But I always felt there was something wrong with the way that we as devotees did that. But I couldn't like put my finger on it. So I had this internal tension because, in one sense, when the atheists are arguing and presenting their evidence, then we say, well, we have these four defects. We cannot trust our mind and our senses. And so, therefore, basically, you shouldn't listen to yourself. You should listen to God instead, or God's revelation. But then on the other hand, we were using arguments based on reasoning and sense perception, like intelligent design, and all these arguments, they are all based on sense perception. So the thing is that, well, can we trust our senses and our reasoning, or can we not? And to what degree, and how do we distinguish between what is a good and a bad argument in the first place? So that kind of it always bothered me. But then I encountered an argument called the transcendental argument for God. It was like 10 years ago, actually. And when I saw it, I remember I had also seen it before. And I can try to explain that argument. And then I'll explain also why that argument is, you can say, it perfectly coincides with our epistemology. And um, the argument is it does not use the word transcendental like we normally do in Krishna consciousness. When we say something is transcendental, we mean it in an ontological sense, that there is something, some substance, which is transcendental, like the transcendental world. But this argument is the transcendental argument. It uses transcendental in what is called an epistemic sense, meaning that in relation to knowledge, it is transcendental. So what we have here is that instead of like looking at evidence for a creator, for example, that is like instead of if you take intelligent design, it's based on sense perception and logic, like basically all other arguments from each side is. But the transcendental argument, it takes a step back and it asks, well, what are the necessary preconditions for sense perception and logic to be epistemic tools at all? Like, how can they be pramanas, which is like the Vedic term for a means of knowledge? How can I trust my senses and my logic in the first place? Um, so this kind of brings us to, or you could look at it from the perspective of, um, you can say when you have an argument that it is an argument that what makes knowledge possible in the first place? How can we know anything at all? Um, So I have this like, I can try to explain it in like a visual sense. So if you have a bridge going over a river, and the pillars of this bridge going into the river are like logic and sense perception. And then you have the atheists coming from one side of the bridge and the theists from the other side of the bridge. And they all agree that, okay, this bridge of sense perception and logic, this is where we debate. These are the two tools we're using. And then they're throwing arguments at each other, intelligent design or God is evil, and they debate. But no one is asking what sustains the bridge? Where does logic and sense perception even come from? And how can we know we can trust them? This is just assumed from the very beginning. So the transcendental arguments ask the questions, how can we even trust sense perception and logic in the first place? And what we see when we analyze this is that if atheism is true, if God does not exist, then there's zero evidence to trust our sense perception and our logic. They actually lead to what is called global skepticism. There's simply no knowledge is possible based on that, and we could argue, that point also, and I can show how that is actually the case. But this is the misunderstanding that devotees and many also theists in general, they will meet the atheists halfway. They will say, okay, let's agree. We have a neutral ground of sense perception and logic, and we meet there and we present arguments. But the transcendental arguments say there is no neutral ground because sense perception and logic themselves can only be epistemic tools if God exists. So you can say the transcendental argument will go like this, like two premises and a conclusion. It will go, if knowledge is possible, then God exists. And knowledge is possible. And the conclusion, therefore, is, therefore, God exists. So that knowledge is possible, premise two, is rather uncontroversial. You can't really argue that knowledge does not exist because that's a self-contradiction. If you say knowledge does not exist, that is also a knowledge claim. So it's not possible to believe that knowledge does not exist. So that's pretty easy. And also most atheists would definitely say that, or else you can just point out that they're contradicting themselves. But the controversial point is that if knowledge is possible, then God exists. Meaning that atheism is not able to account for knowledge at all. So we have to ask ourselves, what is needed for knowledge to be possible? So first of all, we have to be able to trust our mind and our senses. We need to be able to trust logic. We need to accept that truth exists. We need to also have a continuing personal identity, that the person I'm right now is the same person I was like 5 minutes ago. And of course, we take these things for granted. They're so obvious to us that we don't even think about it. That's why people, when they have this debate with atheists, they don't even consider that this is an issue. They just consider, oh, let's agree. Let's find something we agree on. But if, let's say we agree that logic is an epistemic tool, okay, we can use that. But what if logic can only be sustained in a theistic universe? So then, because if that's the case, then atheism is already defeated before the debate even begins. So there's also other things like our memory. We have to trust our memory in order to have knowledge. If our memory is untrustworthy, then of course we can't proceed in any activity at all. We can't get out of the bed in the morning. There also need to be cause and effect relationships in the world. There needs to be an external world outside of our consciousness that, for truth to exist. So if I make a statement, I have to take that statement and see how it corresponds to reality outside myself. So if there is no such reality outside myself, then knowledge becomes impossible. And there is also something called the principle of induction, which we use all the time when we reason, also in science, that let's say if I observe A one time and I observe A another time and the third time, then I conclude, well, next time I'll also observe A. Like if I eat and I become satisfied, then if it happens once, twice, thrice, then I begin to expect that perhaps in the future, if I eat, I will also become satisfied. So that is a principle we use in science, and that also has to be true. Now, if we look at all these, we also have actually values and morality, because morality needs to be absolute. We need to be able to believe there's something absolutely moral in order to have knowledge, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to trust ourselves. Let's say I couldn't trust my own morality. That means that I could lie to myself. So if I need knowledge, I need to consider that I can't lie to myself. I need to have that standard, absolutely. It's not negotiable. So that all these things need to be in place for knowledge to be possible. But atheism cannot account for any of them. Okay, so now we're going quite heavily into the argument already. So let us continue, and you can stop me if there is something
Yeah.
which is a little. But I just have like two examples. If you take logic, so how can we justify the use of logic without God? Then you would have to use logic to argue for logic. You would need to create logical arguments to convince me that logic is an epistemic truth. But that's circular reasoning, because that would only be a good argument if logic was in fact a good epistemic truth. And the same goes with sense perception, that if you argue that sense perception brings us truth, so how would you prove that? Well, you could point out, well, we have observed, we have used our senses in the world, and we have seen this and we have tested it. So therefore, we can reasonably conclude that our senses are pointing towards truth. But that again is circular reasoning, because you're using your senses to prove the reliability of your senses. You can also not prove the existence or the reliability of our memory without using that memory. And this goes for all of these things, meaning that it's not possible, based on atheism, to argue for any of them, and therefore you cannot justify knowledge claims at all on atheism. And this is totally devastating for atheism. It breaks atheism before it even starts. It actually, what I find powerful about this is that it confirms what we already know from our scriptures, namely that in reality, no one is an atheist. We are actually born with innate knowledge of God, and we are suppressing or trying to deny that God exists, and Krishna allows that to happen. He uses Maya to cover our consciousness. And there are also, if you go into the epistemic works, for example, by Baladev Vijayabhushan, he goes through Madhvacharya's what is it called, like his epistemic work, his works on pramanas, and there's a very clear quote there stating that Shabda, like revelation from God, is like the king, and sense perception and logic are his ministers. And it says that without the king, the ministers have no value. If you remove the king, then the authority of the ministers, they also disappear. And therefore, to rely on sense perception and logic alone is like, I think he says something like, it's like a big fog. Like you can't get any knowledge. Knowledge breaks down. So this is like the common misunderstanding, I think, among Vaishnavas, is that we have these three pramanas, and we consider them all to be reliable, but we just consider Shabda to be supreme. But the thing we are missing is that not only are they all reliable, but sense perception and logic are only reliable if they are confirmed by Shabda. So in our scriptures, Shabda is stating explicitly, like God has created us with our cognitive faculties and our epistemic faculties, and he has created our senses and our intelligence, and also stated that they are not perfect, but they are truth tracking. They can be used to track truth so that we can navigate the world reliably, at least for the most part. Of course, they are not without mistakes. But on atheism, there is no way to ground the reliability of our senses and our logic. And one powerful argument is that if you say the world comes from something impersonal, so that means that our cognitive faculties and our bodies and everything are produced by some kind of, you could say, evolutionary process. But evolution is not, that is, how do you say that? It's survival based. So whatever you're doing, you're trying to survive. So that means that when you're thinking, that's also a production of, you're looking to survive, not necessarily to track truth. And we see in many cases that believing in something false can actually save you. It can actually help you survive. So therefore, it could be that our whole cognitive setup is made in such a way that we are actually not seeing the world as it is, but we are making up illusions that help us survive. And therefore, there is no way to trust our cognitive faculties. And therefore, again, atheism is self-contradictory and it breaks down. And the theory of evolution, like at least the unguided revolution, not revolution, but evolution, where there is no personal God that is almighty and also trustworthy, like all good, then knowledge breaks down. So this is like the key argument of the book. This is where it kind of, you can say, focuses on this transcendental argument. So I don't know, it can be a little bit difficult to explain clearly, but I hope that
Well, I'm hoping that people so with this podcast, there'll be a link to your book so
yes,
people can buy it. So I hope people will buy it and then they can read for themselves what the
yeah,
transcendental argument is.
yeah,
Because for a lot of people, particularly the philosophy of religion or the philosophy of religious language can be very overwhelming. There's
yeah,
these ideas and it's very heavy. And
mm,
actually, sometimes you have to reread something several times to
yeah,
really understand it.
yeah.
So hopefully people will buy your book um, and do that.
Actually, my book is now, I have several books, but they're all made available for free. So, we can put the link, and everything is available in PDF and EPUB format for free. And then if you want the Kindle version, it's on Amazon for the smallest permissible, cheapest permissible price.
Great. That's very generous of you.
It's it's like, I just think it's important for devotees to understand this. Um, there are like 3 steps in this, because this is just an argument against atheism for now. But the real argument is that you cannot deny God without affirming God. Because if God is needed for knowledge, then if you say, I deny God, or I doubt God, that means that's a knowledge claim. And you need to be able to trust your mind and senses to make that claim. But since you can only trust your mind and senses if God exists, then you are already assuming the existence of God in that denial or in that doubting God. So as a devotee, if you truly understand this argument, it means that it will change your Krishna consciousness, because you can no longer deny God, and you can actually live a life totally coherent with what our epistemology says, that you have innate knowledge in you and you can't deny it without contradicting yourself. So it's actually pretty far out realization when you get into it.
Mm.
And then, of course, the next step, which is the third one, that is, okay, so then how do we go about preaching on the basis of this, instead of, if you take again intelligent design, which is a very popular argument, and I'm not saying you can never refer to the complexity of the world or the fine-tuning of the world and so on to argue for God if that's like makes sense in a certain situation. But again, if the argument here we are talking about is true, then if I say, okay, look at the complexity, this complexity looks like something is designed. And where there is design, there must be a designer. So in saying that, I'm making a lot of truth claims. I'm trusting my mind and my senses. But if I can only trust my mind and senses if God exists, then that means that the argument is really redundant because I already assume the existence of God in my premises, like just hidden. I'm assuming the existence of God in order to argue for intelligent design. So it's not really needed to do that. And you'll just end up, the atheist will do everything in his or her power to deny what you're saying. So if you're talking fossils or if you're talking complexity, they will just have an endless amount of arguments the other way. And you are debating small things. Okay, there was this fossil found there, but in reality, that fossil was not what they say it was. It was here, and also Haeckel, he made drawings of small embryos, but actually they were not real. So you're talking about very, very small things in reality, and you need to be, an expert if you want to be like a preacher that really knows your stuff. Then you need to know all these things. You need to have access to all this knowledge. But the transcendental argument, you can compare it to, let's say you are attacked by a big monster and you shoot its fingers off, you shoot its ears off, you shoot its nose off. And then, you hope that gradually you will kill the monster that way. But instead, this transcendental argument is simply like you just give one shot to the head and the whole body is finished. So when you say, you just say to the atheist, well, you have to account for your pramanas. You have to account for the reliability of your mind and senses. And the atheist is not able to do that. You can just attack them in the way I showed by showing that they will end up circulating, justifying their logic with their logic, justifying their senses with their senses. And they cannot account for anything that makes their memory reliable or showing that they were not created 5 minutes ago, or showing that there's not some evil demon who has created them. This sounds a little silly in one sense because we all like take for granted, of course, we can trust these things, but actually atheism can't account for it.
Mm.
So therefore, it's like you kill the whole atheistic system from the beginning. And I have 10 years experience now using this argument online, and atheists, they really don't know what to do with it. They are desperate. And that's, the powerful thing is that as devotees, instead of just accepting, because atheism is defined, you can say there are two definitions of atheism that are used, and one is the direct denial of God, and the other is the more sophisticated, like, well, I just lack belief in God. I have not seen any evidence, so therefore I cannot be rational and accept the existence of God. So now the burden of proof is on you. You are the theist, and I'm just, leaning back in my chair and I'm saying, well, give it to me, come with your arguments, and then I'll just shoot, things down, or, I just have to make your arguments sound as if they are doubtful. It's like you can't trust the arguments fully. And then you can use a lot of time on that. But here we're actually saying you can tell the atheist that, well, you're not actually an atheist. I can demonstrate to you that subconsciously you live as if God exists because you're using your reasoning, you're using your senses, you're trusting your cognitive faculties, you are relying on moral judgments, you have values, and your own worldview can't account for that. So you must be borrowing these things from another worldview. And there are only two, God or not God. That's how the world can be divided. So if not God leads to I can't know anything, but then you say you can know, that means you must be borrowing or stealing from God. And this is also what Prabhupada says, right? That we want the kingdom of God without God. That's That's what the atheists really want. And we can truly demonstrate that to any atheist. We don't have to pretend that he is an objective person who is not um, who's like they like to present themselves as they are truly interested. If they really had the arguments, they would surrender to God, but they just don't. But they're really objective and logical. But we know that is not the case, even though we are not saying that atheists uh, that all of them are like consciously suppressing the knowledge of God that they know they have. But what we're saying is that that knowledge is there in their subconsciousness somewhere, and we can bring it out. We can show that they're acting as if God exists, and we can, if you keep pushing it, you might press them to the point where, you know, there is a side of them that they know God exists. There is a side, and yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. One of the things I found quite interesting was in the online synopsis of your book, you say something that's really stuck with me. You say the book also turns its analysis inward. It examines how modern theistic preaching and apologetics often concede too much to atheism by granting epistemic neutrality and treating revelation as optional or secondary. What do you mean by this?
Mm.
It'd be great if you can kind of break that down. And would you suggest that the rise of atheism has partly been the fault of poor arguments and presentations from the theistic side?
Mm. Yeah. So by granting them too much, this is kind of what I also hinted at, that when we meet an atheist on the street, for example, let's say you're out with books or you're standing at your Hare Krishna Prasadam stand and some atheist comes up and wants to argue, or if it's online or whatever, then the tendency is to say, okay, what do we agree on? Well, we agree on sense perception and logic. These are pramanas. And then we start to treat them as like neutral tools, as if they're neutral. And this means that we consider the atheists, they have just as much access to sense perception and logic as we have. And then it goes back and forth and back and forth with arguments, and it could, go on forever. So that's how we end up, you can say, conceding too much to them. It's like you have in the old days when you were fighting a war, you were trying to pick a spot that was neutral, and you would fight there. Some place you agree on, just like the Mahabharata war, right? So they agreed on Kurukshetra, and you also use weapons that are fair. So you want to, okay, I'm using a sword. That means you cannot use a gun. So that has to be fair. So we have this mentality of trying in this debate to do the same. We want to, okay, we agree, sense perception and reasoning. I will not refer to Bhagavad Gita as the absolute truth, as a pramana, because I know you don't accept that. So I can't force it on you. So we'll just leave that aside, leave the Bhagavad Gita aside, and then just use sense perception and logic. And but the thing is that in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is the source of knowledge, and memory and forgetfulness. So according to our philosophy, if someone knows something, it's from Krishna. If they forget something, it's from Krishna. And if they remember something, it's from Krishna. So we do not really agree that sense perception and logic are neutral tools. They're not neutral. They belong to God. God created them. And then what we fortunately also see is that if you leave God out of the picture, they can't be justified. They can't be shown to lead to knowledge. So therefore, there is no neutral ground according to our philosophy. And when we preach, we should act as if there are no neutral ground. We should immediately say, hey, you are using logic. How does logic fit into your worldview? Because logic must be universal. Logic is not something physical. You can't like grab logic and paint it yellow or cut it into pieces. It's not a physical thing. So what is it, and how can you trust it if atheism is true? How do you know on atheism that that logic will be the same tomorrow as it is today? If the universe is just random, it just came from some random explosion or something like that, how do you know the laws of the universe will not change tomorrow? Now, I have a personal God who's eternal, who's almighty. That means he has the power to sustain the laws of logic or the laws of the universe. And he's also all good. So he can also be trusted. And he has also given scriptures that state that he created the universe, he created the mind, he created the intelligence, he sustains the laws. And even when the universe is destructed, when a new universe will come, it will be again created according to the same plan. So therefore, on my worldview, the laws of logic, they fit perfectly into a theistic worldview, but on atheism, they don't. So that's what I mean by, we are by acting as if atheists also have access to logic like we have. That's conceding too much. That's like, we shouldn't do that because it gives them, weapons they don't actually, that are not theirs. So the next question about, or if you, I don't know if you have any questions to this, but otherwise we can.
I mean, my next question was looking at how do you think the Gaudiya
Yeah.
Vaishnava community has dealt with atheism over the years
Mm.
in terms of has it been effective in presenting strong arguments against it, or has it failed to respond to atheistic thought?
So
Particularly the Gaudiya Vaishnava community.
Yeah. So my take on it is that as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because we haven't understood our philosophy probably and our epistemology, especially probably, there's this tendency to become doubtful. Simply like we don't trust 100% that our arguments are correct. And so what happens is that we become more and more weak and we try to, okay, then we have to be friends with the scientists. Prabhupada, he was heavy. Like he was like, there was no compromise. He could speak gentlemanly, but he did not compromise at all. And but we want to make friends with them, and we want to also accept some of their arguments. And then what I see happening in some of these institutions that were actually made by Prabhupada, and they got the instruction to defeat atheism. Actually, we don't see any important work done by them anymore. I don't know if I should say, but the Bhaktivedanta Institute and so on. It's just like it's in my view useless. We don't hear about it. Where's the recent book where something important was written about atheism in the Bhaktivedanta Institute? Like it's not something that the everyday devotee can use on the street. The argument I'm presenting here is actually you don't have to be an expert in anything. You just have to know a little philosophy to understand this argument. You don't have to be a scientist or anything like that. You don't have to know anything about evolution, just very little. So we have dealt really poorly. And another reason might also be that Prabhupada, he was very, very good at it. So when we have his books, we can defeat 95% of all atheists anyway, no matter what, because people just don't think about these things. But the last 5% are the ones that are really also in power. And if we want to defeat them, we have to be more sophisticated. But what I see is that devotees, they don't get into this. They don't really want to study these things. They just do many other things. And also, I'm not saying that this particular service is for everyone. Like we all have our different natures. So, but at least those who are like serious philosophical preachers, they should know these things. And they don't. I have never met one devotee who has gone into this argument. Actually, one devotee I met before I learned about this argument. I have only seen one other devotee who understood this argument. And I was also embarrassed that I have been debating this for 15 years, and and it took so long to get there. But we should help each other. Like, for example, that's why I'm making my books available, is because I think this is important. I'm not trying to say I'm better than anyone else or anything like that. I'm just saying that this is very, very important. And all devotees, say all devotees, and I don't really mean all devotees, but I mean all serious philosophical preachers should know these things and understand them.
Mm.
So I think just generally we have been very bad. I have to look at Christians actually most of the time in order to get good arguments, because and that's maybe because they don't have a really strong philosophy in the Bible. The Bible is not filled with all this information and so on, and so they have to think for themselves in order to to make these arguments to defend Christianity. And devotees, they don't really do that much.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about myself in this situation. I mean, this is talking about atheism or talking with atheists is something I hardly ever do. It's
Mm,
it's it's not anything. I don't seem to spend my time discussing the existence of God with
mm,
atheists. It's just not something that I do, and I don't know why that is. It's certainly
mm.
the people that contact me maybe are interested more in Gaudiya Vaishnavism or different
Yeah.
strands of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and the fact that I I mean this is episode 207, and it's
Mm,
taken us 5 years to even have a conversation about atheism on this podcast because
mm.
it's just not something that comes about much in the Gaudiya Vaishnava community, in my experience.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's not that atheists are, coming to us for debates, or also because we're not big, we're not invited to debates. For example, Christians, you can go on YouTube and you can find so many debates between Christians and atheists, but there's hardly anything with the Gaudiya Vaishnava.
Mm.
Um,
Prabhu, what advice would you give to a practitioner of Krishna consciousness who is wanting to brush up on their arguments to refute atheism?
mm. So they should not do like what I did, is that I just went in there debating and learning by doing. When I started back 25 years ago, I knew nothing about logic and arguments or anything. And I just started online, just ping ponging with atheists. And I got really upset because it really frustrated me that there was people out there who would be so inimical towards God and really try to, put religion down. So I had to study. So they were using a specific term, or they were saying that I was arguing in circles. So I had to study logic and everything, and it happened gradually, and it was a very long and tedious process. And I would recommend people read books about it first and speak with people who are into it. See debates online, find who are the best at it. Um, and especially if it's devotees, you need to find some other devotees that are into it and try to learn from them. Not you don't have to take classes or anything, but you can like get some advice, read this book or that book, or look in this direction instead of that, and then try to avoid too much online debate, because it really doesn't lead anywhere. It just makes you a stronger preacher, but it's also not very good for the consciousness to sit several hours a day talking with atheists. Like, even though you're trying to convince them, it's not. There's just something about it which is not so good. So
Uh, I mean, I feel that it's similar to what you've just said. It's just not a good use of my time,
mm,
So I mean, 20 years ago, when I was involved with a church, I was involved for a period of time with an evangelical church before I joined the Krishna consciousness movement. And
mm,
then I did spend time debating with atheists, and I remember but my mindset and my mentality was different. I was part of a belief system then that believed that this is the only life we get. Reincarnation doesn't happen.
yeah,
After this life, you're going to heaven or hell. So I have to argue with you to get you to
mm,
believe in God so you are saved. Okay?
yes,
But now I feel like there isn't such a desperation for me to do that.
Yeah.
Because if somebody doesn't know Krishna in this life, they'll know Krishna hopefully in the next life.
Yeah.
And they'll have lots of opportunities, you know, and also it's part of Krishna's arrangement.
Yeah.
Krishna, the illusion, Krishna is hiding himself from a particular person.
Yeah.
So now I feel like I don't have that desire. I need to convince somebody. You
Yeah.
know, that's my approach now.
Yeah. And it makes sense, I think. But also, you can say you can give them prasadam. You can do you so you start their spiritual life without them knowing it. So it's very easy. What I would say is that when I debate with atheists, I think it's important that I'm not really trying to convince them. But if I do it publicly, if I write a book, then I'm trying to create an atmosphere
Mm.
in which theism is accepted. Because especially here in the West, at least in Denmark, it's quite extreme. It's so secularized, and people are looking down at religion. Even the religious people here are totally atheistic, and they they don't even use these arguments for God. So this like creating an atmosphere where if you come out hard and say God does not exist, then you should at least feel that there are someone out there who will challenge you on that.
Mm.
Um, so that's kind of my take on it. So I don't really go for converting individuals, even though that's nice if possible. But it's more like an intellectual fight going on between sections of society in order to know who is running the show here and who is allowed to speak. Like for example, if I start to speak and I say I'm a Hare Krishna, then I have to deal with people thinking I'm irrational from the very beginning, just as a presupposition. But if there was an atmosphere where people knew that religious people give good arguments, then it would be much more respected. And if we can expose that atheistic arguments are in fact quite bad, then also atheists will be a little bit, maybe a little bit embarrassed to put this argument forth because they have seen this argument being handled by theists, before.
You also find, well, I certainly find that people are atheists or they become atheist because they're disillusioned with the Christian concept of God or the
Absolutely.
Judeo-Christian concept of God. You know,
Yeah,
what the Bible teaches about God. We don't like that. We don't like the idea of an old man sitting in the clouds who's chastising us,
yeah,
you know, who's punishing us because we've
yeah,
done things wrong. And actually, you present a different idea of God.
yeah,
Wow, I never thought of that. You know, God is loving and kind and caring, and God is a teenage boy that plays a
yeah,
flute, you know. This is interesting. Tell me about this.
yeah, yeah. We should remember to do that because it's I think like people they don't like religions mainly because of the Abrahamic religions like Christianity and Islam also now because there's also a lot of Islam in the Western world now. And it's all based on the idea that God is vindictive and that he puts people into a hell for eternity. And then precisely then you can justify so many evils. For example, let's say you have an island. This is like a typical example. You have an island, and there live some people they don't know anything about Jesus, and the only way to save them is to let them know about Jesus. So you go there and preach, but in order to you figure out, this is a theoretical example, but you find out that you can save one little girl, if you kill all the others. So in this scenario, that would be justified because either they all go to hell or you go there and kill everyone and save one girl. So these types of things are possible if Christianity is true, at least Christianity with an eternal hell. And this makes no sense to thinking people. And people, they think of monotheism, they think of Christianity and Islam. So we need to present the Vaisnava conception instead that God is loving and God does not send anyone to hell forever. In fact, this world is a kind of hell we're in, and He invites us to become free. And we can even take our time. It's not that we have to, there's not some preacher standing and like hammering you with Bhagavad Gita on your head to make you surrender in this life. No, you can just eat some prasadam in this life and just come to the temple and enjoy. And you can even like continue with many of your sinful habits. It's not that of course, if you want to be an initiated devotee and be serious, you should be a little bit more serious than that, but it is possible. And I also do that with some of my, older friends or my family. I've just given them some prasadam, and I don't do anything else. I don't debate atheism with them.
Mm.
It makes no sense. Um, and also, again, I acknowledge that we are very different, all of us. So it's not for everyone to do the same service. But it would be nice, I think, if ISKCON could provide a small course or something like that for all devotees who want to just learn or understand the basics, and then present, an apologetic, as it is called, a way of preaching. Prachara is the Sanskrit word. Preaching in a way that is consistent with our epistemology instead of in a way that is not consistent with our epistemology.
Mm.
I would also, another important point I would say is that when we get into atheism, we really have to understand that we are actually arguing against the inner atheists we have. We are not pure devotees. That means that inside of our subtle body, there is a small atheist or a big atheist that is, that has all kinds of arguments. So when we get into atheism, we are trying to subdue that or defeat that inner atheist. And I think that might be the most important, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, that he's actually writing all these things to purify himself. So it's a purification of our own consciousness more than it is a purification of others' consciousness. We have to be humble about it also. It's like maybe my interest in atheism comes from that my inner atheist is a really big demon that needs to be defeated. So I think we have to consider that also.
Mm. Can you just remind us, Prabhu, how can people get hold of your books? We're going to put some links with this podcast, but just remind us again, how can people get hold of them?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's called Ajit Krishna Dasa .me, me, consciousness. ajitkrishna.me. And there's a link, books, and there are, you can find them on Kindle there, and there's a link to download a free PDF and a free EPUB version also for all of them. I think I have 8 books out.
Wow, you've been busy. You've been busy.
Yeah.
It's good. I like to meet fellow authors, people who've written books, and I love to find out people's niche interest topic. What is it that
Mm.
enthuses you and encourages you? It must be something so that you're so impassioned about that you sit down day after day, week after week, writing and writing and writing.
Yeah.
Um,
So this is
so
something I cannot stop. I can't stop thinking about these things. And it's like the most important in my life. Like my head just revolves around it all the time. So this is, for example, last time we spoke about the changes to Prabhupada's books, and in actuality, this is something I don't like. Who likes to have this problem shouldn't even exist.
mm,
But I think I can use some of my skills in logic and argumentation in that area also. But it's not something I enjoy in that same way.
thank you. I appreciate that. We've got two more questions, but they're kind of broader questions
Mhm.
that kind of relate to anything, but you can connect them with the topic that we've been touching on. So the
Yeah.
first one is generally, how can we attract more people to Krishna consciousness?
So I think that there are many ways, but the way that I'm mostly concerned about is that we have to be strong in the philosophy. So the stronger we are in the philosophy, the more calm we can be when we are speaking with people. It's usually when you're uncertain of yourself that's when you become really square-minded and like hammering. But if you really uh, understand things and understand our philosophy, you can be really calm. And you really can be that because our philosophy is really the best philosophy. It's actually true. Uh, so therefore, it will just help so much if devotees would study Srila Prabhupada's books more, and then also go a little deeper and look into what the acharyas have written.
mm,
There are several acharyas that uses this transcendental argument. They don't call it that, but they do that. We have Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has one example from the Bhagavatam, and so on. So going deeper into the philosophy will help. And this is what I think. There are several places where Prabhupada said, if you don't read these books enough, you will fall down because it will become sentimental. And we should also remember that studying the books is not just a gyan, it's actually worshiping Krishna with our intelligence. And of course, it all depends on our mindset. But it is kirtan to preach, and it is hearing the transcendental sound vibration. So I would say trying to become more serious about the philosophy will greatly help when to attract people, because we can actually be strong and not just pretend to be strong.
mm.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And finally, I always ask people this question, or give people this opportunity to say something. If you were given 5 minutes on primetime TV to present a message to the entire world, what would you say?
Yeah, well, then I would probably argue along the lines we have been doing today, saying that there's really no that really saying that we actually all know God, that the knowledge of God is innate, and our attempts to try to get around that are simply shows that, or they are all self-contradictory. And I would like go along the lines of what I have said today, that we must purify. I would end up saying like we should purify our consciousness, because it's not just a theoretical or intellectual understanding, but it's then we have to purify our consciousness by finding the Shabda, finding the revelation of God, and use that to purify our consciousness. And I would point people in the direction of Srila Prabhupada. And because without Srila Prabhupada, there's really not much to be done. We can try to purify our consciousness or thinking about God, but it will not really help too much. It will become very dry. And God is not dry. And there is nothing about Krishna as a cowherd boy in an argument for God. So that we can't go that far with logic. Logic can, okay, there is a supreme creator, and he's probably all good and all powerful, but it doesn't. We can't reach the flute and the blue collar of Krishna, etc., and the loving interactions between God and his devotees. We can never reach that. So we need to go to Srila Prabhupada and read his books again and again to become purified. So yeah, something like that.
Mm. Thank you so much, Ajit Krishna Prabhu. It's been a great conversation today, and I feel a bit guilty that it's taken 207 episodes to get to a conversation about atheism. So I was very keen, as you know, to record this podcast because it's something that's not been touched on before, and it's one of those really big topics, actually, that
Yeah.
we all need to familiarize ourselves with. From the Gaudiya Vaishnava perspective, from like that, can we present the arguments for the existence of God? Can we do that? And I need to brush up as well. I spend my time talking about other things, and actually I need to, if I meet an atheist or someone who's doubting the existence of a supreme deity, I need to be able to, this is what the situation is. So I would encourage people to get access to your free books or your very reduced price books. And I'm going to do it as well. I know I said I'd do it before, but I will do it. I will do it.
Thank you.
And then I can write a little review as well.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. I'm actually going to write it down now because I really also like to support devotees with their projects. I'm really passionate about that. Something that's running their own project. They're financing it themselves. They've spent time on it. I mean, your most recent book, which is now out, how long did it take to compile and put together and plan and write and everything?
Well, it's like you can say that much of the stuff in the book are many, many years old, like 5 or 10 years.
Mm.
So, and it has been refined and so on. So it's difficult to say how long, but when I really decided to make it, it was maybe a month or something like that. I actually did it quite fast in the
Oh,
sense that I had so much material that it was,
yeah.
now I could put it together. Yeah. Um, so definitely, I would also say like if people get the EPUBs, that's just because I like to listen. It's so easy when I'm going to work or riding the bus or cleaning. Then at least I can get the EPUBs to work as like there is a Google Reader who can read the book aloud while I work. I can't do that with the PDF. You can also do it with Kindle. So if people are thinking, I don't have time, but really
Mm.
it doesn't take a long time. And my books are not like 200, 300. It's like you can say smaller books actually, like maybe 100 pages or 120 maybe. So there's like small and concise, I would say.
Thank you, Prabhu, and thank you for presenting this very important topic to us today. I've really appreciated your time. I'm glad that we got a time in the end. We're both busy people and different responsibilities. So it's been great having you with us. Thank you for presenting. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So, Ajit Krishna Prabhu, just stay on the line, and I'll just say goodbye to all of our viewers and listeners at home or wherever they watch these podcasts. It could be on the bus, it could be in Starbucks, it could be in the library, it could be at their grand's house. I have no idea. So, a big thank you to Ajit Krishna Prabhu for being guest number 207 as well as guest number 70 on the Hare Krishna Project podcast. I'm pleased that he's returned after 2.5 years. I think one of only 7 or 8 people that's done more than one. So it's great to have him back. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button so you can be kept updated about future podcasts and video productions from the Hare Krishna Project. And if you're watching this on Facebook, which is the other means whereby you can watch these podcasts, if you haven't already, please do like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page so you can be kept updated about future podcasts as well. Okay, until next week, I will see you all soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.